welcome. We are so glad that you're here with us today for our Brave Conversations at Work, Say What Matters Without Burning Bridges. I'm Katie Finch, part of the Eye-Opening Enterprises team, and I'll be your host for our session today. So a quick reminder, we'll be live for 60 minutes, but there will be a replay. So if you need to step away or you want to visit the content later, feel free. There's a starter question already in the chat to get you thinking. Feel free to drop your own questions here as well during the seminar or during the session, and we'll follow up with answers next week. So today's session is part of a broader leadership training that we offer through our Elevate Work Executive Leadership course, but we created this standalone workshop because we know that brave conversations are one of the hardest and most essential parts of leadership today. Whether you're here representing a team, a department, or just showing up for your own growth, we're so honored to have you. So now I'm excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Isaiah Pickens. Dr. Isaiah Pickens is a psychologist, an executive coach, and co-founder or founder of Eye-Opening Enterprises. He spent years helping leaders like you build trust, navigate tough dynamics, and lead in a way that's both emotionally intelligent and results-driven. Let's dive in.
Thanks, Katie. Y'all feel that? Y'all feel that the heart palpitations as you go into a restructuring conversation and you know that the person you're about to talk to needs to be laid off? Or maybe it's those racing thoughts you have as you're doing a staff observation and you know you need to go in and give some really tough feedback to someone. Your mind's in overdrive. Or maybe it's you're holding your breath because there's a performance improvement plan. We know those pips. Those pips can cause a little bit of stress, a little bit of anxiety. You're feeling it in your body. Or maybe you're a junior staff who's talking about advocating for a promotion and you're not sure if there's going to be some retaliation that happens because of this brave conversation that you want to have. You all feel that in your body because there's a common denominator in all of these conversations. We want to have solutions, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't damage the relationship. And that's the tough part. That's the tough part in all of this. We want to create solutions and we want to be able to say the thing that we need to say as directly as possible. But how do we actually do it in a way that preserves our relationship and preserves trust moving forward? Well, that's what we're here today to talk about. And I am so excited to lean into how we do that in an emotionally intelligent way. And so before we jump in, I want to ask you all a question. I want to ask you a question about the brave conversations that you need to have or think that you might need to have right now. I'm going to put a question on the screen. I want everybody to answer this question. What is the brave conversation you want to have at work? Is it performance improvement of a colleague or a direct report? Is it advocating for my promotion or someone else who deserves it? Is it addressing unfair treatment by a colleague? Or maybe it's problematic team dynamics, or maybe it's a conversation about burnout, letting someone know the cavalry is not coming. We are going to have to do this work and double down. And you're telling your team that without any support. Or is it Tom's fish sandwich? You know that fish sandwich that's in the lunchroom? And you're like, Tom, stop bringing fish to work. Is that the brave conversation you need to have? All right, we all have brave conversations that we need to have. And it looks like, drum roll, we're about to get 5 seconds before we finish this poll. All right, and we're stopping. All right, so as you can see here on screen, many of you said, 31% of you said the brave conversation you really need to have is that performance improvement with a direct report, with someone on your team. That's such a hard conversation to have. How can you do that while getting results and still moving forward? But the other thing can be really problematic team dynamics. All of this involves people, which makes complete sense. Now, here's what I want us to think about. Brave conversations are important, but before we talk about how do we have better brave conversations, we first have to talk about what makes brave conversations important right now and what makes them difficult, what makes them tough. Now, brave conversations can happen in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of reasons why people may not start brave conversations, but I'm going to give you the 4 top reasons why people don't lean into these tough conversations, these brave conversations. The first reason that people don't lean into these brave conversations is because they feel stuck. Not only do they feel stuck because they may not know what to say or how to start the conversation, but they may feel stuck for another reason. I'm a psychologist, you all. So I focus on how do I grow and how do we support leaders' emotional intelligence skills and people's emotional intelligence skills. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper for you all. One of the main reasons people feel stuck in terms of what they should say is because of anxiety. And it's not just any anxiety, it's a specific kind of anxiety called anticipatory anxiety. Anticipatory anxiety is that kind of anxiety where you're already thinking ahead about what might go wrong. And not only that, you're thinking potentially the worst case scenario. You want to go in and you want to advocate for a promotion. Not only is your boss not going to give you a promotion, they're like, can't believe we're paying you this much already. Go back to the dungeon. You get no more lunch, right? You spiral into this really, really over the top anticipation of what could go wrong. And that anticipatory anxiety, what it can do is it can paralyze us because we get stuck in thinking about all the worst case scenarios and we don't even try to go in and lean into that brave conversation. The other thing that this anxiety can do is it can make us misread situations or think that we have limited options to achieve what we need to achieve in order to get to our goal. And so that part is a huge reason why people don't start brave conversations in the first place. But the other reason that people don't start brave conversations is because folks get defensive. Have you ever had this person who, no matter what you tell them, they're going to have a reason for why they did what they did, and they're going to turn it back on you. You don't understand what I was trying to do. No, I need to give you feedback, and this feedback is for all of us to be better. No matter what, there's this defensiveness, and that level of defensiveness can feel so draining because it feels like to get even a point across, to move this brave conversation forward, you have to fight. You have to do mental gymnastics about what you say here, how you say it, when you say it. And it's so much work. And sometimes you may say, why am I even starting this conversation with this person who I know is going to fight me tooth and nail the whole way? Now, those are the first two reasons why people don't have brave conversations. But the third reason is people be lying. People can sometimes show up in these conversations and not tell you what the real truth is, right? You told her that this assignment needs to be turned in early. You all agreed on it. You said, I understand. I know why this assignment needs to be turned in early. And it comes time to turn in the assignment. It comes time to move this project forward. And they're like, you never told me that. You never told me that to turn it in early. We had the same timeline. You're like, whew, let me gather myself right now because you are blatantly lying about a conversation we've had. And this can really be frustrating because it feels like there's no way for you to move forward. But here's the thing. I told you I'm going to get deeper with this beyond just the surface level. All of this is kind of part of the surface level, this first part. But the second part is we can be dishonest with ourselves. We can sometimes sit with conversations or even before conversations and say, it wasn't that bad. It didn't really have that much of an impact. And you're not directly saying what was the impact of the person's actions on you and the rest of the team. This type of dishonesty towards ourselves also leads to brave conversations that feel like they aren't being honest because we're not saying what we really need to say. And so when we talk about this dishonesty, it can really be frustrating. And even some people may call it gaslighting when someone says something that they know that they said and they say they didn't say it and it makes you feel crazy. All of this can happen in these brave conversations and make it tremendously difficult to move forward. And ultimately, you know where it leads you? It leads you to feeling like these conversations are pointless. Like, why am I even here wasting my breath, my energy? Should I even be risking my reputation to have this conversation? Will there be retaliation that comes from this? And that can happen when the conversations don't seem to have any real world impact on what happens next. And so it leaves people thinking, maybe I shouldn't even take the time to figure out what I need to do or say or have this brave conversation because it's only going to make things worse or have no impact at all. And so when you talk about being able to understand moving forward on brave conversations and having these tough conversations, you first have to understand what's getting in the way of you or others on your team having these brave conversations in the first place. Are you stuck? Are others defensive? Do you feel like there'll be dishonesty? Or is something pointless? But here's the thing. Brave conversations, these conversations don't happen in a bubble. They happen in context. They happen in the context of our workplace and what our workplace culture is, but it also happens in the context of our wider culture, what's going on outside of work. And so before we jump into how to have better brave conversations, I want to really lean into why brave conversations matter today, not tomorrow, not yesterday, today. I don't know if y'all know this, but the machine's coming for your job. We have had such an amazing proliferation of artificial intelligence, AI. AI is going to be doing all the technical things in the near future, whether it's writing reports, crunching numbers, all the things that humans have historically done. AI is doing. But here's what AI can't do. And leaders such as Reid Hoffman, who started LinkedIn, and Jack Ma of Alibaba have said this. The skills that humans need to have are the skills that are uniquely human. And these are the people skills. Because here's the thing, if the AI is telling Bob to go do X, Y, and Z, that's one thing. But usually, Bob is going to be told to do what the AI said by his boss, Rachel or Tom. And if Rachel and Tom's like, just do what the AI says, get out my face, I don't have time for this. Well, the way that Tom or Rachel are using their emotional intelligence skills, which are very little in this situation, the way that how they are communicating may lead Bob to be able to say, I'm going to do this, but I'm just going to do this, not going above. I'm not staying late. I'm not doing any extra work. And so all of the focus, the passion, the fulfillment, the energy that you're expecting to get from folks who work with you, they're gone. They may stay in the job, but they're quiet quitting. They're not fully present there. They're not doing what they need to do because of how other people are treating them. And so we're going to need to have brave conversations around how we're treating one another, even when technology is present. But that's just one context of where we're at. I'm not sure if you all have felt this thing, this feeling. It may just be me, but have y'all felt this feeling of stress? I mean, I think we're a little stressed right now, just a little bit. People are feeling the weight of rising costs and maybe their pay not matching those rising costs. People are feeling how much the change in so many things around society are happening at such a pace, and people are trying to figure out, how do I support and protect myself and my family? And so whether it's about peace in a certain part of the world, whether it's about how we deal with schools, whether it's about the types of jobs that are available, whether it's about a number of issues, the stress of this current moment is creating such tension, not only for individuals, but within families. Families are separating. And this is just what's happening on the human level. On the geographical level, we see climate conditions changing, literal geographical climate conditions changing. We're dealing with floods, we're dealing with tornadoes, we're dealing with extended heat. I dealt with a heat wave on the East Coast just a little while ago. These things impact how much anxiety and stress folks feel, and they're not leaving it at the door. They're bringing it into work. In fact, the American Psychological Association does a study every year on work habits and what people are thinking about at work. Since the pandemic, work anxiety has been the number one issue that employees have identified as a challenge for them at work. It surpasses depression, it surpasses other mental health challenges, it surpasses so much. It is the highest and most height of what people have felt over the past couple of years, and it is impacting the way that they're showing up. And so this work stress requires us to have brave conversations about how do we manage it more effectively. But here's what happens at the end of the day. As humans, we are looking for stability. We're looking for stability in relationships. We're looking for stability in finances. We're looking for stability in who we are and how we see ourselves. And we'll do what it takes to find that stability. And what that means sometimes in an uncertain world is it can lead to feelings of instability, which makes a person start to search. That search that they're having have happen right now may be a search for something different, something better, another job. And so even as we speak, some of you all need to stop looking for a job right now. Even as you're working with folks may be looking for other employment. They may be looking for other places. They may feel like the place that they're at is not creating the stability that they feel like they need for their life. And here's the problem. If you create a work culture where brave conversations aren't invited, people are making these decisions in isolation. And here's what that means. They are making decisions, and then a day, 2 days, you may get a week notice, They're like, I'm gone. They haven't talked to you about what they need, what will work. And some folks, I mean, now folks are just ghosting. You're like, you just didn't come in for a whole week and you quit. How does that work? Where do they do that? Right. And so, this experience of people actually leaving and turnover and retention increasing because people don't feel like there's a space to negotiate. Look, I am not necessarily needing more money, but I'm needing more flexibility. And I need to be able to spend time with my family. If they can't have that brave conversation, they're not going to even attempt it. And they're going to try to find a place that can meet their needs without consulting you, without talking to you. And so the question becomes, can you create the type of work culture that allows you to begin to think about and understand what brave conversations need to happen before all of this goes down? So, I got another question for you all. With all this being said, what makes brave conversations tough for you? So go ahead, answer here on the screen. What makes brave conversations tough for you? Is it anxiety about what will happen, fear of retaliation or defensiveness? You don't think it will lead to real change, not knowing what to say. You have a tough time controlling your emotions. Some folks, I know you turn to the Incredible Hulk. You're like, wow. What is it for you that makes tough conversations, these brave conversations, difficult? All right, I'm gonna give you all about another minute, another minute. Pull these together, pull these together. All right, all right. Okay, okay, okay. Five, four, three, two. Okay, the poll is ended. Who's the winner? Oh, folks, they are really not having it with the retaliation and defensiveness, right? That has shown up as the number one reason why people aren't having conversations. And I'm glad we're talking about that. Just as a little bit of a preview, we're going to talk about ground rules for brave conversations. And a part of those ground rules is how do we create psychological safety and psychological bravery in these conversations. That's a big part of what keeps people from it because they're afraid of retaliation for what they're saying. But it also seems like people just don't know what's going to happen or they don't think it's going to actually be effective. And so, as we talk about this, let's really lean into what will address each of these issues. And so, I am going to go ahead and now that we have the groundwork, we understand why we're having brave conversations, what gets in the way. How do we actually start to have better brave conversations? And so I would like to introduce you all, for those who have not heard of this technique before, the RAVE technique. This is a technique that Eye Opening Enterprises developed around creating an emotionally intelligent way to have brave conversations with a twist without needing to sacrifice relationships. This can be something that's tremendously, tremendously difficult. Now, what is RAVE? Let me break this down for you because this is what we're going to really dive into, and we're going to give you tools to leave with today. All right. Today, you can go have that brave conversation afterwards. Hopefully, no one just like, I quit, I'm done, I know what I need to do. But this is an opportunity for you to think about how can you reframe, affirm, validate, and empower to have more emotionally intelligent conversations. Now, we're going to explain exactly what those are. But here's what I want to say to you first. This RAVE technique, think about it as a set of guides. What the RAVE technique is a set of prompts for what you can say, what you can do, and how you can think about brave conversations going into these brave conversations. What you'll get today during our time is you're going to get one of these prompts. One of many prompts that we have. You're going to get one for each of these: reframe, affirm, validate, empower, that you can start using today. And so when you get these prompts, they allow you to kind of have guidance for how to deal with the barriers to brave conversations. And so talking about these barriers to brave conversations and using this RAVE technique, again, this RAVE technique is a set of prompts. It's a guideline. It's not a formula. It's not an equation, but it's something that you can use wherever you're at in your different conversations so that you feel like you have a toolkit to be able to manage it effectively. But here's why it is effective. And here's why it is effective. One of the reasons that people have a hard time with feedback and these brave conversations is because they don't trust the intentions of the person in front of them. And so, one of the first things that this technique helps you do is it helps others trust your intentions when having brave conversations. I want you to think about a time where you had some really tough feedback from somebody and you took it well. What was it that helped you take it well? What likely helped you take it well was because you trusted that the reason they were giving you the feedback was to really help you be better, was to really help the team, was to really support you in some way. It wasn't to make you look stupid. It wasn't to prove a point. It wasn't to undermine you in some way so they can go up the charts, right? You trusted their intentions. And the more that we can create conversations where people can trust our intentions, the more we're able to effectively move forward by to say what we really need to say the hard, the brutal, the tough truth, but do it in a way that preserves the relationship. Because here is the truth. The way that people read your intentions is the filter by which they respond to your feedback. I'm going to say that one more time because that's important. The way that people read your intentions creates the filter for how they respond to your feedback. So if you want better responses, try to better communicate your intentions. All right. And so that's the first part of it. But here's the other part of these brave conversations that can be really difficult. I don't know about you, but sometimes I go into these conversations and I'm like, you're going to learn today. My emotions feel so intense, and I have to figure out a way to keep my emotions in check. And so the second part of the rave technique that it really supports is allowing you to communicate directly, say what you need to say, but while keeping your emotions in check. And here's what this means. This doesn't mean that you're suppressing your emotions. Emotions are important. They inform what's important to you and what you want to talk about. But it means that you have something that we call emotional regulation. You're able to actually sit with these intense emotions and let them inform what you do, but they don't have to direct what you do. That's the difference. They can inform what you do, but they don't have to direct what you do. And so when we're talking about helping you understand and think about being able to have these brave conversations, yes, it's about the other person and what they're saying and what they're reading in terms of intentions, but it's also about you and how you're able to say what you need to say, but still stay in control of those emotions so that people can hear what you need to say. This is what the rave technique does. And so as we launch into this rave technique, I want you all to really think about yourself and think about what are the barriers that you said were toughest for you going into this and how you might be able to uncover. So y'all ready to dive in? We're going to dive in. Let's do it. Y'all can tell I get hype. I got a lot of energy. All right. So we said that the first barrier to brave conversations was feeling stuck in your anxiety. I want to go even deeper on that. I told y'all, I'm a psychologist. I like to go deep. One of the reasons that people get stuck is because they begin to lean into thinking that there are limited solutions. There's one solution. The rigidity of how they're seeing the situation makes it more difficult for them to even start a conversation, to even lean into a conversation. So how do you start to get unstuck? You start to get unstuck by reframing the way you're seeing the situation. So reframe can be something that happens in your mind, right? That you're thinking about the situation differently. But reframe can also be something that you are communicating to help the conversation move forward. Think about reframe as the thing that helps you get unstuck. So here's what it is. Reframe is finding interpretations of the situation that motivates you to keep moving forward, right? And here's the thing about these interpretations. They don't have to be right. They don't have to be wrong. They don't have to be good. They don't have to be bad. Don't label them. It's just finding another real interpretation of the situation that motivates you to keep moving forward. So here's what you can do. And we're gonna break this down for you, all right? So here's the prompt, right? I told you with the rave technique, there's several prompts that you get in order to do this. This is one of the prompts. I want you to ask yourself, what's one other way I can think about this conversation to help me move forward? I know that this feels very, very simple. This feels very, very basic, but I can't tell you how often people go into brave conversations because emotions are so high, because the stakes feel so high. They get locked into one way to do things, one solution, and they lose their curiosity. They lose their ability to ask themselves, is there another way that I can see the situation? That simple question can disrupt everything that you're thinking about in the moment. All right, so what does this look like in practice? So let's say this is your first thought going into a conversation. There's nothing we can do about increasing the budget for this project because they won't listen. So you're already thinking like, I need to get things done with this project, and they're not going to increase the budget, it's over. The reframe for you to think about going into this is the reasons I need the budget changed do not all involve money. We don't have to figure everything out about the budget to talk about those things. I'm going to focus on one thing that feels doable regardless of the budget to start the conversation. Now, all of a sudden, you're unstuck because you're not thinking, I need to tear up the budget. We need to redo everything. You're saying, look, there's specific things that I need that may not have everything to do with the budget. We can shift money. We can, bring someone else in. That reframe got you unstuck. And now you're leaning into this conversation. Now, the same way that reframe got you unstuck, in terms of your thought pattern, it may also get someone else unstuck. Maybe they're like, look, we can't change the budget. We can't change the budget. Whoa, 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 calm down there, buddy. I don't want to change the whole budget. Why don't we think about this? There's a couple of things I think we can do, budget or no budget, that need to be shifted for this project to really work. Can we just focus on those things first? And I'm like, okay, all right, the pressure feels like it's off a little bit. The stakes are a little bit lower. Let's focus on those things. And then you never know where the conversation goes. You're like, you're bringing up a good point. I think we need to change the budget. And you don't know where that conversation goes, but you have positioned yourself to move forward on a brave conversation in a way that you would not have moved forward before. So that is the first part of being able to deal with some of the barriers. But let's go to number 2. Y'all know that person who is defensive, affirm to counter defensiveness. Now, this is something that I think was powerful when I learned it, and I see it so much now. People get defensive when they think that you see them in a way that they don't see themselves. I'm going to say that one more time. People get defensive when they think or believe that you see them in a way that they don't see themselves. And so what affirm to counter defensive is being able to acknowledge important parts of someone's identity, real parts of their identity, to help them feel seen, to help them feel like I see who you are. And don't worry, we're still going to say the hard thing, because that's what the validate part. We're going to get to that. We're going to still say the hard thing, but this first part allows you to communicate your intentions better, right? Because if I believe that you see me the way I see myself, your feedback is more valid. Like I feel like you get me, you understand me, I can hear what you have to say, and I can do something maybe a little bit differently, right? And so acknowledging an important part of someone's identity to help them feel seen is so important. So what can you do? What's a prompt here that you can use? You can tell the other person, I know it's important to you, blank. Whatever it is, make it real. Make it real. The blank is a real trait, real characteristic, or an action that is important to the person and helps them feel understood. All right. So being able to tell the other person, I know it's important to you to feel blank, and then being able to have that real trait is so, so important. And so, what does this look like in real life? Let's say you're giving feedback to a team leader whose communication style is causing confusion about assignments. I know you all probably experienced that because you said that team dynamics is a big issue that folks are dealing with. Now, before you give them this feedback, you say this first. I know it's important to you that your team is positioned for success. So you've now affirmed their identity as a leader who cares about their team before jumping in and talking about their communication style. Because if you didn't do that, they may read what you're saying. They may read your intentions as, oh, you don't think I'm a good team leader? You don't think I want the best for my team? You think I'm just in here kind of winging it and not really helping my team? The defensiveness starts to come out because they feel like you don't see them the way that they see themselves. But this one statement cues them in on your intentions and says, hey, I know it's important to you that your team is positioned for success. I see the kind of leader you want to be. And now it just puts their guard down a little bit, and it lets them know, okay, maybe I can have this conversation with this person and get some feedback around it. Now, all of this is tremendously, tremendously important, but it doesn't still get you to the heart of the issue just yet. And that's what we want to get to, right? We want to get to the heart of the issue. And so the way you get to the heart of the issue, honestly, the way you honestly get to the heart of the issue is by validation. So look, I'm going to give you all a alternate definition of validation. It's a real definition, but it's alternate. A lot of people think validation is saying something is okay. Yes, that can be a form of validation. Like, you're good, you're okay, this is all right, I agree with you, all those things. But the kind of validation that we're talking about is being able to honestly say what it is that's challenging and lean into that without a filter. And what I mean without a filter, it doesn't mean that you're being mean or you're being rude or you're being not compassionate towards somebody. But what it means is that you're being clear about what the impact is on yourself and other people. You're not diluting that, you're not dialing that back. You are validating the actual pain or stress that it is causing. A big part of our work, especially when we talk about emotional intelligence skills, is being able to read the pain or stress someone else is experiencing and being able to read the pain and stress that we are experiencing. Sometimes we are so focused on being comfortable that we are forgetting that it is okay for us to be able to lean in and understand what may be causing pain and stress, because that's the only way to deal with it, by being truthful and honest about what is causing pain and stress. And so everything that we're talking about is about being able to get to that truth as effectively as possible and in a way that allows the other person to hear. And one of the ways to do that, especially with this RAVE technique, is to lean in to the pain and stress, to be direct about what the pain and stress is instead of avoiding or leaning out for the pain and stress. Now, I'll give this caveat. Part of what we really encourage folks to do with the validate portion of the RAVE technique is to develop self-regulation skills, your own ability to regulate your emotions. Because when you are in a space that you're feeling like you have to be really true in this way, it can be really stressful for you. It can really make you feel ill-equipped or make you feel like you're causing more harm than good. And what I want folks to be able to do is I want you to be able to manage those intense feelings, learn from them, have them inform what you do, but ultimately say what you need to say. And when we talk about this, part of what we're looking at is how do we say this as directly as possible? So here's a prompt, right? Here's a prompt that you would use. This may not have been your intention, but the impact of blank is blank. So here's the first blank. The first blank is the problematic action, saying it with no chaser. Say what it really is. And the second blank is specifically how it caused pain or stress. And here's why this is so important. I'm going to break this down for you all a little bit. Sometimes what can create barriers to brave conversations is people feeling like others are making assumptions about their own intentions, making assumptions about what they were trying to do, as opposed to being curious or being able to talk with them about what was happening or what they were trying to do. By saying this may not have been your intention, it's not letting them off the hook, because it may be a different conversation if it has been their intention, but it's just saying, I don't know for certain if this was your intention or not. And then it goes into the impact of what you were doing. So you're being direct about that is blank. Here's the thing about good, brave conversations, giving feedback, all of that. You have to be specific. People don't change because they hear vague directions about what they should do, who they should be, all those things. You have to be specific. And so when we talk about this, part of what we're talking about is what it looks like in this type of conversation. Let's say during a project debrief, you share with your direct report to validate the stress their behavior is causing. And again, when I mean validate, I'm talking about be direct and honest about what's happening. This may not have been your intention, but the impact of you not proofreading your work is several errors are in the work and requires me to take time away from other projects and team members to correct it. So you see there, you said this may not be your intention, but you're quickly telling them the impact of this specific problematic, challenging behavior, proofreading your work, is creating errors and it's taking time away from me. And I'm here to be able to support other team members. One of the things that we do in our larger Elevate Work program is we help people understand the benefits and burdens protocol. And what that is simply is allowing people to understand what is a fair sharing of burdens at work and how do you communicate that effectively. This is one tool to help you do that, because what can happen in workplaces, especially when there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of competing demands, is that people don't feel like they have permission to say where the work does not feel like it's fairly shared, because everyone's just trying to get the goal done. Everyone's trying to get the work done. And what this technique allows you to do is it allows you in a way that's relational instead of transactional, relational in nature, to be able to talk about and provide feedback and have conversations around how you are impacting others, even if that isn't your intention. All right. Because here's another thing I think to keep in mind with all of this. Even though we're saying this may not have been your intention, we're saying that. Here's something I want everyone to take away with them: intention does not equal impact. Even if you have good intentions, you want to help everyone out and jump into their project, the impact could be like, leave me alone. You're making things more confusing. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. Just do your part, right? And so how do you start to have that conversation? Now, ultimately, where you want to go with all this, we did the reframe to get unstuck. We talked about how we affirm to get past defensiveness, and then we validate so that we say the thing that is really true, that's really honest. The final thing we want to do is we want to empower ourselves and others in these conversations to create real solutions, right? This is the part that I think gets so many of us, because it's like we have these conversations, we're talking about all this, but then what? What happens next? And so, how do we move to a place to empower to create real solutions? Well, it starts with being specific about what you think will actually help address the negative impact of the situation. I think what can happen in a lot of brave conversations is we get nervous. And because the conversation is difficult, is stressful, it's creating anxiety, we want to just be finished with it. And that rushing to finish it means that we may not be as specific about what we do next, or we may not be specific as what will address the negative impact of the situation. We may be in a school environment, or in a space where someone needs to take on some extra responsibilities, and we already know they're overburdened, and this conversation is uncomfortable, and so we're just like, all right, well, we'll just figure it out. But you don't know who's doing what next. We don't know who's in charge of what, and you're not specific about what will actually address the negative impact of the situation. And so here's a way to be able to lean into this. Here's what you can do: share with the other person. This is what you say: based on what we both shared, it sounds like blank is a good next step. Is there anything you change about this before we agree on what to do next? Now, here's why this is framed in this way. The first blank is the next concrete step, the next action that you need to take. But here's the other part of this that I think is really important. You start by saying, based on what we both shared, to acknowledge that this is something that's taking into account what the other person has talked about in this conversation. You may not agree with it, you may not follow their lead, but you're taking it into account for what you're proposing for what's next. That's one piece of this that's really important to keep in mind. The other thing, and again, it communicates your intentions. The other thing that's important here is that, is there anything you change about this before we agree on what to do next? Sometimes in brave conversations, we have too many open-ended questions. And I know this feels like an open-ended question, but it's a more of a question that is in response to something that you've already presented, right? You've presented what it is. You're asking them, is there anything else we should add to this, or just, or change in some way, as opposed to, what do you think we should do? I don't know. Right? That these conversations kind of get awkward, and it's like, we should do the thing we talked about. And so being able to be as specific as possible, and you may not have all the solutions. I want you all to think about brave conversations as a process and not an event. Because oftentimes you need to have these conversations over time in order to manage them most effectively. And so when we think about brave conversations as a process and not an event, part of what it allows us to do is to be able to say, we can propose something specific and know that that may not be the final result, but we're inviting someone to respond to something as opposed to come up with their own ideas. So what does this look like? Let's say after approaching a senior leader about an unfair promotion practice, a junior leader shares the following to empower action. Based on what we both shared, it sounds like bringing this to HR for an updated policy is a good next step. And then they may ask, is there anything else that you think we should think about in response to do what's next? Now, I know this especially can be anxiety provoking for someone who's a more junior, who has less positional power, as we say, as we're talking about that. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about that when we get to psychological safety and bravery. But what has happened here is there was a respect for the leader based on what we both share, right? Like I share some stuff, and what I'm hearing from you, based on what we both share, it sounds like bringing this to HR for an updated policy is a good next step. It's a concrete thing that you can see, you can measure, you can test, you can see if it's happening to do next. And then you're inviting the other person to provide any feedback on that, right? And so now you've empowered you and the other person and whoever else is in this conversation to actually make real change, to actually move things forward. And this may be the first of several conversations, but this is such an important step to close out this conversation on. And so, with all of that being said, let's talk about all this together because the rave technique, what I love about it is it's very flexible. And what do I mean by that? It's a technique that we set up in this order specifically because we believe that it can really help the flow of a conversation, reframe, affirm, validate, and empower. But again, it's not an equation. So it can be done in whatever order. Whatever you feel like you need at a given point in a conversation, you can pull out and use that technique. Maybe you need to affirm someone who's getting really defensive and say, look, I see how much you care about being both a good parent and doing your work here, and it's causing you a lot of stress. I want us to think about how do we do the work here effectively while also supporting your needs as a dad. And that alone may open them up to different solutions, different ways of thinking about things. But it took that affirmation to lower that defensiveness. And that may have been at the end of the conversation. It's okay where it comes from. It's not a formula, but these prompts help you lean into it and it becomes a skill. Think about this as your emotional intelligence gym, right? You don't go to the gym one time and be like, oh, I lifted those weights. I'm Superman now. You go to the gym and then you're like, I gotta go to the gym again. I gotta go to the gym again. And then you build those muscles over time. So let's look at how this all fits together. So here's a sample script, and this is just a couple of excerpts from the actual script that you'll get as a follow-up to our conversation here today, as Katie shared earlier. And so I want you to imagine that someone was just one of your direct reports, someone who you're working with, a team member, was having a really, really hard time turning in quality work, right? And so part of what you want to do to start the conversation, say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you and just talk with you about something that's really been on my mind. I think is tough in an area of improvement that we need to make happen as a team, right? So you're not catching someone off guard. You're setting the stage. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to ground rules in just a moment. But let's say that that is the start of it. So to reframe, you may feel like this conversation needs to move forward, but this person may feel like, what I'm providing is cool, it's good. And so your reframe may actually be out loud with them, right? They may feel like this is going to be a disciplinary action, and it may be, but that's all it's about. And this person just wants to make me look a certain way. And so you can reframe this conversation by starting off with a question. I wanted to check in about how things are going for you. I know we've been working on tight deadlines, and I imagine it hasn't been easy to juggle everything. How have you been feeling about your workload? So this reframe, and this is kind of a little bit more sophisticated than what we were talking about in the other example, but what it's doing is it's being able to identify what might be other reasons that this behavior is being seen. Again, reframe is to be able to look at what are other reasons or interpretations behind what's happening so you can get unstuck from having one rigid way of thinking about how all of this works. And so this conversation, if it begins with something like this, it allows for you to be able to lean in a bit and get unstuck if the other person feels stuck in some way. Now, after you say that, being able to affirm, I really appreciate the effort you've been putting into your work. I know it's important to you that you turn in high quality work and you care about being a valuable part of the team. Your contributions matter, and I see the dedication you bring. So we all have these folks. They work really hard, but their work isn't good. and it's a hard conversation because you want to make sure that they stay motivated, but you also need to tell them some hard truths. This form of communication is not about letting them off the hook. We're not letting them off the hook with this. What we're doing is we're telling them, I see you the way you see yourself. And also, let's get to this next slide. you got to do better. You got to do better, right? And so again, saying it in a way that really kind of validates the impact this is having. That's the other thing I really want to bring up. And I'll share this before I read this. Sometimes feedback can be more personal than it needs to be. And what I mean by that is the way that we're giving feedback, it feels like there's something wrong with that person as opposed to there's an opportunity for this person to grow. I know that sounds like it's the same, but those are actually two different things. Telling someone that there's something wrong with them versus telling someone there's an area that you need to grow that I believe you can grow shifts the whole tone of the conversation. And the more that we can lean into the latter, the more opportunities there are for growth. And if we don't see that growth, we may need to have an even tougher, brave conversation about terminating someone or they not being the right fit. And again, that's a part of what we talk about as well. How do you have emotionally intelligent conversations around the highest stakes issues as well? So, as an example of that, that said, you're having this conversation. That said, I've noticed that some of the recent work you've submitted has had some challenges with meeting deadlines and quality expectations. I'm sure that's not intentional, but I want to talk with you about it because it's starting to impact the team. And then this is, again, just a clip from this Rave sample script that you all will get. You go on to tell them the ways it's impacting the team. It's hurting other people reaching their deadlines because they're waiting on your work and your work has to be reviewed for so long, or they're trying to be able to convene several teams. And because the quality of your work isn't there, they have to pause on convening these teams because they aren't sure where those teams fit in because it's not clear based on what you're providing. All of that can be said during this part. And this can be hard. This is hard to give that. You're going to still feel anxious. You're going to still feel some of these intense emotions. You may still feel really angry, right? And you're like, I'm tired of seeing this. And your emotions are built up. All of that is okay. This RAVE technique is for you to be able to regulate those intense emotions and to have ways of talking about this in a way that moves people forward. And so finally, when we empower people, what we want to do is have them think about like what is the tangible next step. So a next step we can work on is checking in at key points in the process to make sure you're on track, right? So instead of you just giving me a project at the end when you're all done, we're going to have checkpoints. Or maybe there are certain resources or adjustments that could make things easier. Do you have other ideas about what you think would help set you up for success before we move to the next steps? Again, you're not just asking them, what do you think? You're saying, do you have anything to add to what I proposed, what I presented? This very specific next step, can you respond to that? Or do you have a response to that? This allows you to have a more concrete next step moving forward. So, with all that being said, I want to go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to share a poll with you all to allow you to see what it is that you may think is really helpful for you in terms of thinking about next steps for a brave conversation. So as we jump into that part, I'm going to share this poll for everyone. So let me see here. So if you all answer this question, you see here on the screen, which aspect of the RAVE technique feels most useful to you? Which aspect of the RAVE technique feels most useful to you? And so as we focus on understanding how we look at this RAVE technique and understanding what it does, let's be able to really think about which one resonates the most for you. Great. I see people putting it on. I see people seeing that. And Katie, real quick, can everyone see my Rave script screen? Something happened with my computer. I just want to make sure it's still up for everyone.
Yep.
Great, great, excellent, excellent. All right, all right. It's about to close, about to close, about to close. And we're done. Sorry if you didn't get a chance to put yours down. I kind of thought this would be the case for most people is to validate. It's hard to say what's really true, right? Because you start to feel butterflies in your stomach, your thoughts. Have you ever had this moment where you're like, oh, I'm about to tell them, I'm about to tell them, and you get up to them, you're like, so what I wanted to say was, and you just don't have the words. It overwhelms you. And so for a lot of people, this is common for the validate to ensure an honest and candid conversation is really hard. But again, these are all skills that we're talking about that can help you build and help you grow. All right. So with that being said, we're going to jump into the final portion of our time together in these last 10 minutes and talk about how do we start with ground rules for psychological safety and psychological bravery. I know for some people, this idea of psychological bravery may be new. Psychological safety has started to get a lot of traction. What psychological safety is, and this is something that we really specialize in, is Being able to create a work environment where people can speak up, make mistakes, and take risks without fear of humiliation or retaliation from others. That can be really hard because humiliation and retaliation can look a lot of ways, and especially people who have more decision making power, they may not always know that they're doing these things in response to folks. And so being able to create the conditions for brave conversations to be effective is so powerful. But here is what psychological bravery is, and this is why this is so important. Psychological bravery is people being able to advocate for what they need or what others need that are creating barriers to other psychological safety. So if someone else isn't feeling safe, if I'm not feeling safe, psychological bravery is about being able to have the skills, the tools, the ability to communicate and to advocate and to talk about that thing. These are such important conditions for being able to have these brave conversations in the workplace, building it into the workplace culture. Now, how do you go about doing that? Well, there's a couple of ways you can go about doing that. One way that we do it in the Elevate Work program is help people create psychological, safe, and brave agreements. That's outside the scope of what we're talking about here today, but it's a way to understand how to communicate so that people feel psychologically safe and brave while they're doing it. And we're not talking about psychological safety being the same as feeling comfortable. It's not the same as feeling comfortable. What it is even when I'm uncomfortable, even when I'm unsure, even when I feel this discomfort, I have the tools to be able to manage the stress that's happening around me, or I can reach out to someone who can help me manage that stress. And this is tremendously, tremendously, tremendously important because what can happen when we talk about dealing with and using these tools is that the emotions in the moment can overwhelm people and you're not saying what you need to say. But here's the other way in brave conversations of how we support psychological safety and bravery is through creating ground rules. And so you'll get actually, as a follow up, some ground rules for brave conversations. I want to take you through a couple of ground rules and share why these are so important for you all to think about and put in place ahead of your brave conversations to support psychological safety and psychological bravery. So, these are 3 sample ground rules that come from the ground rules worksheet that you'll get that will support your brave conversations. I'm going to really kind of take you through why these support psychological safety and bravery. Acknowledge what has been shared before sharing personal perspectives. Again, part of psychological safety is feeling that you can take risk. And here's the thing, we don't always have to agree. Psychological safety doesn't mean that we're just doing what someone else wants because they say they feel unsafe. What it is creating the conditions for negotiation so people can talk about what needs they have and how they get met. And specifically, how do you balance the person's needs with the organization's needs? Because that's always the balance. Balance the person's needs with the organization's needs and negotiating what that looks like. Well, the intentions of the other person can feel like it's only about the organization if they're constantly talking about what they need, or it's only about them if they're only talking about what they need, and they're never acknowledging what has been shared before they share their personal perspective. And so acknowledging what has been shared before allows you to communicate, my intentions are to share what the organization needs or to share what I need, but I hear you. I see you. Simply saying, I heard this, I said, just repeating it back, reflecting it can be so powerful in these conversations. So the other ground rule, consider how your words will be interpreted, right? By individuals with different positional power. This is a very different and more robust conversation, but our position in the organization, how much decision making power we have, can shape the way people understand our words. I'll give you an example. When I was an employee and working with folks, I would say, man, I really want to change something about the lunchroom, or I really want to work on this project. And everyone was like, cool. I became CEO. I became in a leadership role. I was like, I really want to change something about the lunchroom. I really want to do this project. All of a sudden, people start to move around. It's like, so how are we going to work on this? I was like, oh, I was just sharing my ideas. Same person, same words, but positional power changing. It changes how it lands for people. The more we can be aware of how our words land for people, especially in these spaces, becomes so important. And here's the other thing, checking in to see how what you said lands. I'm a psychologist, so I feel like I'm pretty good at reading people, and I still get it wrong. And so I constantly have to check it and say, how did that land for you, right? Even if I had this intention of supporting, intention does not equal impact. How did that land for you? And so as we round out today, here's some things I really want you all to take away before we share with you some resources that we want you to take with you and some opportunities that we have available for you. Understand that brave conversations don't have to get in the way of trust. They can actually deepen trust in meaningful ways, because if you're focused on both the solutions and the relationship, and this relationship management and emotional intelligence skills, all of a sudden, the thing that was a problem or a barrier, or the thing that you felt like you couldn't get through, because you got through that tough thing, there's deeper trust. There's more willingness to trust what's being said and how it's being said. And then finally, it's so important not to just think about psychological safety and bravery as a few people's jobs. It's just the leadership or just the folks who are on this committee for a culture. It's everyone's job to create psychological safety and bravery in the workplace. And being able to do that can be so powerful. And so, with that, I thank you all so much for sitting to learn an emotionally intelligent tool to be able to move forward. And I want to bring Katie back up to share what are the resources that we're going to provide for folks as you leave this webinar, as you leave this masterclass today. And just thank you for your time and your energy.
Thank you so much, Isaiah. And thank all of you for being here and showing up for this conversation. Don't go anywhere yet. I want to wrap with 2 closing steps. So first step, you'll receive a follow-up email from us tomorrow with the replay, the Brave Conversation sample script that Dr. Pickens referenced, the ground rules handout, which includes those and others for ground rules for your Brave Conversations, and the key takeaways from today's session. We know that you can use these tools today, so we want to make sure we get those to you as soon as possible. We also know that there are other opportunities for this growth with the other work that we do with our Elevate Work Executive Leadership course. So that course is 11 lessons, only part of which is the content that we went through today. So while these free resources are powerful, they're really just the tip of the iceberg of the Elevate Work program. For those of you who want to go deeper, and we've never done this before, so we'll see how it goes, we're offering today's attendees and registrants an exclusive opportunity to join the Elevate Work Executive Leadership Course Essentials and a single one coaching session with Dr. Pickens with that purchase. So for just $499, the essentials would typically be $750. A coaching session would typically be $500. We want to give you both for just $499 only if you registered for this webinar. And here's what you'll get: 12-month access to our self-paced essentials program, 11 lessons covering everything from relational leadership, emotional intelligence, feedback, repair, boundaries, and so much more. A bonus one-on-one coaching session with Dr. Pickens, downloadable tools, scripts, and reflection guides, a certification of completion, and access to our Elevate Work community. This includes special group coaching, mastermind style sessions that we only offer to enrolled leaders. So normally $750 for the essentials, $500 for the coaching. We want to give it to you for just $499 for being a part of this conversation, because we know how important this work is and we want to be there for you. You'll find a link in the Zoom chat, and then you can scan the QR code on your screen if you want to sign up right away. We know that investing in leadership, especially in a moment like this, takes courage. But we also know the world is changing really fast. So the challenges we're facing today require a new kind of leader, right? Someone who's emotionally intelligent, relationally skilled, and equipped to lead through uncertainty with clarity, care, and consistency. If that's the kind of leader that you want to be, and we want you to be that kind of leader, we want to be there for you. Thank you again so much for joining us. And we do truly hope to see you inside the Elevate Work community.